We see a lot of processes that are maybe too complicated, require too much manual intervention. I think one of the areas which is going to need to be relooked at is the use of single-use type equipment. Again, the biopharma has very much gone for the single-use approaches, and that works for biopharma. But I think if we're talking about the scales and the economics for the food industry, it's kind of reignited the interest in a more traditional stainless steel type plant. Though, of course, some single-use has its place, certainly development. I think that's where we can help companies the most, is where they've made technology or equipment choices that are not scalable either technically or economically.
Welcome back to part 2 with Richard Alldread, who is the CTO at the Cultured Hub. If part 1 opened your eyes to cultured foods bioprocess challenges, this deep dive will fascinate you. We're exploring how Givaudan's flavor expertise, Migros' retail knowledge, and Bühler's production equipment experience create a unique development environment for cultivated meat and fish. From helping startups avoid common pitfalls to the stainless steel versus single-use debate at food scale, Richard shares insider insights on what it takes to make cultured food reality. Let's jump right in. Are you juggling the complexities of CMC development while trying to enjoy the beauty of biotech? Have you ever wondered if there's a way to simplify bioprocessing? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist Podcast, where we're diving headfirst into the very challenges you face. We're breaking it down, demystifying the jargon, and giving you the keys to unlock your full potential. I'm your host, David Brühlmann, and I get it. With 15 plus years in the biotech industry, I face the same challenges you do. There's a way to simplify and streamline so you can remove complexity, you can skip trials and errors, deliver without delay your groundbreaking therapy to clinics and market, and still enjoy every single step. Do you want to learn how industry experts and I did it? Grab a cup of coffee and your favorite notebook and pen. Now is the time to take your bioprocessing game to the next level. Let's smarten up biotech. Speaking of development and facilitating that, let's talk a bit more about your role now as a CTO at the Cultured Hub. So tell us what the Cultured Hub is. And how do you enhance and facilitate specifically process development and scale up in the food business?
So what we are is a joint venture that was started 3 or 4 years ago, and it's a joint venture between 3 Swiss companies, Givaudan, Bühler, and Migros. They'll be well known to most people in Switzerland, maybe not so much outside. They all have an interest around the field of food processing, and had all obviously seen that cultured meat was starting to rise to prominence and a lot of activity around it. So their idea was to invest in a facility, which is the Cultured Hub, where we will not make our own products, but we will work with small companies or sometimes larger companies just getting into the field, and give them a place to go where they can take their processes and their product development from that kind of small lab scale, which a lot of companies are at the moment, and start down the path of turning it into a true commercial process and product. So we're based in Kemptal, just outside Zurich, which is a site with a very famous history in terms of food production. We're in a building where I'm told the very first stock cube was invented by Maggie. We've created a nice facility within the building, and we go to the 1,000-litre scale, which is, again, back to the scale issue, is not going to be big enough to supply supermarket shelves, but is probably right now big enough for companies to aim at to produce trial batches of product, particularly for maybe selective market launch. And we help companies essentially by providing the facility, but also the expertise to take things from the lab into a more commercial environment. I like to think we're essentially a CMO type organization that can provide the expertise to turn lab-based processes into potentially commercial viable processes, which is often missing. Of course, within biopharma, there's a very well-developed and healthy CDMO type infrastructure there. And of course, food companies could go to the biopharm providers, but of course, they would pay the biopharm type costs. And we really have a focus to try and create a niche in that market for the food industry.
Besides the need for a bigger facility, what needs and also challenges do you most often see while working with this? I assume mostly food startups coming to your center, right?
The biggest thing is the access to that next level of scale. So most people we work with have developed to what I'd call the bench scale. So the 5, maybe 10 litre type scale. What they are really missing then is the ability to take that into a more commercially relevant system. First and foremost, we can provide that. What we can also do is through our joint venture partners is link them to the other people that are going to be needed to successfully commercialize a cultured food product. So aside from our focus really is producing the biomass, but of course, if you've ever seen a cell harvest from a bioreactor, it's not terribly appetizing. To turn that into attractive food product takes a lot of other processing as well. That's where the downstream processing comes in, turning it into some item that is essentially a food product. And that's where our joint venture partners can have a big impact as well. So Givaudan are very big in terms of flavors and fragrances. Bühler are really the food processing type equipment. And Migros, of course, for those in Switzerland will know, are one of the biggest supermarket chains, but also do a lot of food manufacturing themselves, food processing and manufacturing. So as well as focus on the process and the production of biomass, we really want to be able to link customers to the other things they are going to need to create attractive food product. And the final area really where we're trying to help people is that regulatory discussion. So at the moment, one of the things maybe holding back the industry is there's no real well accepted regulatory pathway to getting products approved. There's been some products approved in some markets. Certainly Singapore have been quite active. I think there's a couple of things in the US. There's a pet food in the UK, but generally there's not a well understood regulatory pathway. Again, that's maybe a difference to the biopharm industry. Everyone's aware of the clinical trials process, the need for GMP and so on. So what we're doing is trying to create a consensus around what the regulatory pathway should look like for a cultured food as well.
Now, developing a new product or a new technology in the lab is one thing, but then moving that into process development, scale up is a whole other ball game. I'm curious, Richard, what common pitfalls or mistakes do you see, especially startup making in terms of equipment choices, technology choices, or strategy choices that you need then later to course correct them on? Or is there any advice you can give to our smart biotech scientists who are listening to actually avoid these mistakes?
So it varies, but to generalize, I would say we see a lot of processes that are maybe too complicated, require too much manual intervention. I think one of the areas which is going to need to be relooked at is the use of single-use type equipment. Again, the biopharma has very much gone for the single-use approaches, and that works for biopharma. But I think if we're talking about the scales and the economics for the food industry, it's kind of reignited the interest in a more traditional stainless steel type plant. Of course, some single use has its place, certainly development. I think that's where we can help companies the most, is where they've made technology or equipment choices that are not scalable either technically or economically. That's where we can really make a difference to them, is get them into systems that we know do scale.
So that means that in the food business, the go-to choice is much more stainless steel, and there is only little single-use technologies because of the costs mainly, right?
It seems that way, yes. I think that's likely to prove to be the case, but both for the cost reasons and the scaling reasons. I mean, to my knowledge, the biggest single use for mammalian is around about 2,000 litres, and food industry is certainly talking an order of magnitude above that ultimately for product production. So I think stainless, also the cost as well. And also supply chain is another issue. I remember some of the supply chain issues for single-use items not that long ago in the days of COVID, even getting them for biopharmaceutical processes where I worked at the time became a huge challenge. And I think the supply chain needs the biopharma industry will always take precedence there. So I think for several reasons, back to stainless steel, though, as I said before, I think we need to rethink a reactor and what is needed in a reactor in order to make it cheaper and more robust, easier to scale.
To enable a full breakthrough for the cultivated food technology, what new innovations do need to happen, or things that are already in the making you're seeing coming, whether it's on the economics, the regulation, technology, or whatever area you're seeing? What do you think will be the main drivers to enable a full scale and I'd say worldwide adoption of cultivated food?
A number of things, and I think they all to some extent need to come together for it to be a truly mass market industry. So on the technology side, I certainly think a more effective use of things like process modeling and understanding the process in silico is going to be a big help. Certainly cost wise, I think media costs need to reduce. Potentially we've come down a lot, but that need to come down further. And the equipment needs to be cheaper as well. So while still maintaining certain quality attributes, again, maintaining sterility is not negotiable in any form of cell culture. And of course, certainly in producing for the food industry, also biopharma, the use of antibiotics in your cultures are certainly not welcomed. So cheaper equipment, cheaper media, better modeling, and again, back to the regulation, well understood regulatory pathways, approval pathways to get products approved for the market.
Before we wrap up, Richard, what burning question haven't I asked that you are eager to share with our biotech community?
I think the big point we haven't talked about is the one of, are consumers going to accept these products?
Oh, that's a good one. Love it.
This is probably not a technology. It's not a biotech issue. We're now into the weird world of marketing and so on. But we've all seen over the last number of years, food products being attempted to be launched and failing. We've seen controversies over GMOs. You see in any newspaper, articles about what a problem it is that we're eating too many highly processed foods and so on. And a lot of people do have an issue with the thought of lab grown. I try and avoid the use of the word lab grown, but cultured food, certainly cultured meat. They like to think it comes from Daisy the cow who spends her time in the Swiss Alps leading a nice happy life until turned into steaks. Sadly, most meat we eat doesn't come from that kind of environment. But that's a different issue. So I think the industry will be nothing unless we can produce attractive products that people are going to want to buy. People won't buy these things through any compulsion. It needs to be something that people will pick up off the supermarket shelves, order off a menu in a restaurant without even worrying about the fact it's cultured. And that to me is the big unknown here. I think it's not an insolvable issue. But as an industry, we need to make sure that any products that are launched are firstly safe, of course, but also attractive products that are not a poor substitute for what's seen as a real thing.
It would be interesting to ask our listeners, Smart Biotech Scientists, tell us what you think. Would you rather eat a cultured Wagyu steak next time you go to a steakhouse, or do you still prefer the real deal? It finally comes down to that, whether people accept to eat something that might be slightly different than to what they're used to.
Yeah, and I think if you ask most people, and certainly I'm sure most of your listeners, you said, if you ask them, would they try the products? Most people would say, yes, I would try it. But to me, the big test is, once I've tried it, I've tried lots of things. I wouldn't necessarily go back and eat them again. And I wouldn't go back and pick them up off the supermarket shelves every week or every other week. So I think that will be the big test. Yes, people will be curious to try things, but will they routinely consume them? Again, I think it's all solvable, but we need to go about it the right way. I do remember the huge controversies over GMO food. Being a molecular biologist, I was very much in favor of some uses of genetic modification to improve food, but it was handled in a very bad way and the wrong messages got out. So we need to avoid doing that.
This has been fantastic, Richard. I greatly enjoyed our conversation. What is your 20-second takeaway or the one key message you want us to walk away with?
My key message is that Cultivated cells for food production is a viable business. It needs some improvements in cost, in technology, but it's here, it's happening. There are products on the market, albeit fairly niche. It will bring about big improvements in technology, I think. And I think one of the biggest takeaways is that perhaps a lot of those improvements will filter back into the biopharm industry. And we do always hear how costs are an issue, even in biopharma, costs of healthcare and need to provide drugs to less well-developed countries. I think some of what's happening in the food industry will at least help contribute towards those issues as well. But cultured food is here. It's been here for a long while. There's always been microbial type products on the market, but we're now seeing it in animal cells, and it will develop very rapidly, I think, over the next few years. And we hope at the Cultured Hub to very much be in the centre of it and to make Switzerland the centre of it. If we can do within Switzerland a little bit of what Lonza, Roche, Novartis have done for the pharma industry, then that will be good.
That sounds very exciting. I'm very much looking forward to what's going to happen in Switzerland and in Europe and in the whole world. Richard, where can people get a hold of you and learn more about the Cultured Hub and perhaps even potentially explore if you could help them develop an innovative food product?
So the usual places, really, you can search for us online just as the Cultured Hub. We're also on LinkedIn. I'm happy that people contact me via LinkedIn as well. If you search my name, you'll find me easily enough. I'm quite fortunate in some ways in that I have quite an unusual surname that doesn't come up too often. So you'll find me quite easily on LinkedIn. And we're in Kemptal, just by the train station, easy to get to. So please contact us, and your people are welcome to come and visit with arrangement as well and see what we're doing.
Smart Biotech Scientist, I will leave all the links in the description. Please reach out to Richard and learn more about the Cultured Hub. It's very close to the airport in Zurich, very close to Zurich, Switzerland. Come and see them. And thank you so much, Richard, for being on the show today. I very much enjoyed our conversation.
And me. Thank you, David. Great to talk to you again.
Great insights from Richard Alldread on the future of cultured food and bioprocessing innovation. From mindset shifts for biopharma scientists to breakthrough technologies needed for global scale, we have covered the industry's transformation. Are you ready to explore new bioprocess frontiers? Or do you have any development challenges? Well, schedule your free consultation at BrühlmannConsulting.com and let's navigate these exciting challenges together and make bioprocessing smart. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Don't forget to leave a review on the platform you found us on, and I'll see you next time. All right, smart scientists. That's all for today on the Smart Biotech Scientist Podcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on your journey to bioprocess mastery. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. By doing so, we can empower more scientists like you. For additional bioprocessing tips, visit us at smartbiotechscientist.com. Stay tuned for more inspiring biotech insights in our next episode. Until then, let's continue to smarten up biotech.